So far in all of our functions, we've had a fixed number of input arguments and also a fixed number of output arguments, including possibly 0 in both cases. But it's possible to have a variable number of arguments, both input arguments and output arguments. A built-in cell array called var_argin can be used to store a variable number of input arguments, and there's a built-in cell array called var_argout that can be used to store a variable number of output arguments. These are both cell arrays because the arguments that you pass to a function or you return from a function could be different kinds of things, and so cell arrays can be used to store different kinds of values in the elements. Let's look first at a variable number of input arguments. So again, there's a built-in cell array called var_argin that stores a variable number of input arguments. You could use this to store all of the input arguments that are passed to the function, or only some of them. There's a built-in function n_argin, which returns the total number of input arguments that were passed to the function. So not just the values that were stored in the cell array var_argin, but all of the input arguments. Since var_argin is a cell array, we use curly braces to refer to the elements, which are the input arguments. So there are two different kinds of function headers that you could have when you have a variable number of input arguments. You can put all of the input arguments in the built-in cell array called var_argin. So let's presume, for example, that we have a function, the generic name is function name. We're going to have one output argument from the function, and we don't know how many input arguments we're going to pass to the function. So we could use var_argin to store all of the values that are passed to the function. Or if we know that we're always going to get some input arguments, but we're not sure whether we're going to get others or not, we could build in the input arguments that we know we're going to get in the function header, and then we could use var_argin to store the rest of the things that are passed to the function. So let's say, for example, we're going to pass coordinates of a point to a function. We know we're going to at least get two-dimensional points, so we know we're going to get x and y values. What we don't know is whether we're going to get a z value or not. So there are two possibilities again for the function header. We could just use var_argin, so that would store everything that is passed to the function. So the value of x would be stored in var_argin curly braces 1, the value of y would be stored in var_argin curly braces 2, and if we get z, that would be in var_argin curly braces 3. So since we know that we're always going to get x and y, we could just build those into the function header. So another way of organizing the function header is to have the function name and then parentheses x, y, var_argin. So the value of x gets passed to x, the value of y gets passed to y, so that's nice and mnemonic. And if we get a value of z, that would be stored in the cell array, in this case in the first element of the cell array, var_argin curly braces 1. Now in both cases, if we got x, y, and z, n_argin would be 3. So whether you build in input arguments or you just use var_argin, again, n_argin tells you the total number of input arguments that are passed to this function, which would be 2 if you only had x and y, or it would be 3 if you had x, y, and z. You can also have a variable number of output arguments, and the cell array var_argout stores the variable number of output arguments. So as with input arguments, sometimes you know you're always going to have output arguments, so you can build those in, or you can have var_argout store all of the output arguments. So in other words, everything that the function is going to return. So again, there are two different kinds of function headers. You could just have var_argout to store all of the values that the function returns, or if you know you're always going to return some things, you can build in those output arguments and then have var_argout store anything else that the function is going to return. Now to call this function, we would give the name of the function, pass the input arguments, and then the number of variables that we have on the left, that's how many output arguments we're expecting. The function n_argout returns the number of output arguments expected from the function, which is the number of variables in the vector on the left-hand side of the assignment statement when you call the function to begin with. So for example, if the left side of the assignment statement says in square brackets x, y, z, that means we're expecting this function to return 3 things, so the value of n_argout would be 3. So again, n_argout is the total number of values we're expecting, which is the number of variables in the vector on the left of the assignment statement. Question number 3. The function nargin returns the total number of input arguments, the length of the cell array var argin, or both. They're the same thing.